Hi friends, I'm back. My name is Dr. Nurita Roy Chaudhary, and in today's episode, we will explore Dalit identity and consciousness and why they matter for justice, both social and ecological. So, first, I will explain what Dalit consciousness is and why it's key to craft a fairer world. And then I will share two powerful poems written by Dalit scholars and artists to show how this consciousness reaches out to the planet itself. And before that, I would like to thank the subscribers of Planet Decolonized. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel, and also thank you thank you for whoever has been engaging with my earlier videos in the form of very smart comments and very engaging rather comments. And that is, I really appreciate thoughtful comments which even make me think about what I have talked about in the respective episodes. So yeah, back to the video today. So first, let me talk about who are the Dalits, because I am speaking to a global community and it's important for the global community to understand that Dalit is not just a caste category that is relevant to the Indian geography, but it's also a global question and a global category that has to inform our analysis of socio-ecological crises as such. So the Dalits are historically, socially, and culturally defined communities who have been shaped through the violent act of being considered as untouchable. So the roots of Dalit oppression go back to the origins of the caste system in the Hindu religion as such. In India, the caste system is an institutionalized form of oppression of members of the lower castes, particularly Dalits. This institution gained a further stronghold in structuring the Indian economy through its formalization during the British colonial period. Dalits experience social, economic, and religious discrimination due to their generational and inherited occupations, which they are born into, involving tasks that are ordinarily considered physically and ritually polluting, such as manual scavengers, working with dead bodies and animals, or removing human waste. They also include landless, farm laborers, cobblers, and communities engaging in occupations that are socially stigmatized as undignified. The name Dalit has been adopted by people otherwise referred to as Harijans or the Untouchables to symbolize a movement and resistance to centuries old oppression under the caste system. In legal and Indian constitutional terms, Dalits are known as the scheduled castes. There are currently roughly 166.6 million Dalits in India, according to the Minority Organization report in their website, written in their website. So, coming back to the question of caste being global issue, why is it so? So, the inequities caused by the caste system are a global issue because they extend beyond India's borders to other South Asian countries as well as to the Indian diaspora worldwide. Just as cultures migrate with communities, the system of Dalit oppression, caste privilege, and caste inequality also migrates with Hindu communities. Now, coming back to the question of whether caste is class or is caste different from class, and the caste versus class question have been debated by several scholars, especially in relation to Karl Marx's understanding of class being crucial for understanding the material deprivations of communities globally. So, Karl Marx, in the preface of A Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy in 1859, wrote that, I quote, the totality of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of the society, the real foundation on which arises a legal and political superstructure, and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. End quote. Arguing that economic base shapes the superstructure consisting of social, political, legal, and ideological forms that ultimately shape consciousness. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was a Dalit scholar, jurist, activist, and political leader and the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. He was one of the strongest critics of the caste system in India and was responsible for integrating Dalit rights and anti discrimination laws into the constitutional framework. Now, Ambedkar rejected Karl Marx's base and superstructure framework for India, opposing that the mainstream Marxist idea that caste is merely a superstructure with the economy as its foundation. He argued against economic determinism, insisting that social reformation or the annihilation of the caste system must precede political economic transformation of the unequal class structure. Thus, while Marx argued that material conditions determine consciousness, Ambedkar emphasized that the violent ideology of Brahmanism prevalent within the Hindu religion, particularly its cultivation of hierarchies of servility, plays an equally central role, shaping consciousness, thereby dismissing the centrality of material conditions alone. As Ambedkar famously stated, caste is not a division of labor, but a division of the laborer. Laborers were divided along caste based forced hierarchies. Caste is therefore central to the class formation in post colonial India's capitalist trajectory. This difference within labor consciousness is crucial to understanding why class based analysis of material conditions of deprivation alone are insufficient to dismantle the conditions of Dalit people's oppression today. For example, Dalit people's oppression often appears in handling waste and garbage, which is nothing but a byproduct of endless economic growth, production, and consumption under the capitalist system. It also manifests in the constant displacement and disposability of landless laborers, who often work in precarious environments as low paid migrant workers and also often unpaid, exposed to extreme climatic heat waves and environmental shocks, all in the name of development. So, friends, this debate between Dalit emancipation and Marxism and whether caste is class has more fully been taken up by Indian Dalit scholar named Anil Teltumre. So this is the book, and the name of the book is B.R. Ambedkar, India and Communism, introduction by Anand Teltumre. So on page 16 of the introduction, for instance, Anand Teltumre, in the chapter titled Bridging the Unholy Rift, he writes, I quote, that for instance, M.N. Roy's India in Transition, dated 1922, the first Marxist study in the world of changes in a colonial landscape under imperialist subjugation, went further in dogmatically asserting that India, like European societies, crossed the feudal stage not as a result of violent revolution, but as a consequence of a long-standing contact with the political and economic measures of a highly developed capitalist state. With feudalism gone, caste, which was supposed to be its feature, lying in the superstructure, naturally became a rootless phenomenon of little significance in Roy's scheme. So, therefore, Ambedkar's comment about constructing the superstructure before the foundation could not be called amiss. So, this is Teltumre's critique of Indian Marxists' rather poor understanding of the caste structure and just calling it as division of labor as opposed to calling it as division of laborer was taken up by several Dalit scholars who argued that caste cannot uh, economic conditions are not central to understanding deprivation, but economic conditions in alongside caste is central to understanding the oppression of the Dalit communities, and that the Hindu Brahminical structure is as central to the economic base to understand Dalit oppression today. So, moving on to the next part, which is why does Dalit consciousness matter for planetary consciousness today? Like, why is the Dalit question even important for us to address socio-ecological crisis? So, as I mentioned, Indian Dalit scholar Anand Teltumre argues that capitalism in post-colonial India has worsened the conditions of deprivations of the Dalit communities, clarifying why Dalit emancipation and Marxism are not incompatible. He argued so in his introduction to the book I just mentioned, titled B.R. Ambedkar, India and Communism. As I also mentioned earlier, abolishing the Brahminical caste hierarchy is vital to dismantling the class structure, which separates not only laborers from capitalist owners of production, but also the consciousness of laborers from one another. Moreover, the class and caste Moreover, the class and caste one is born into are major determinants of life chances, shaping pathways that influence life choices and long term well being. Addressing these interlocking structures of oppression is essential because they shape our understanding of whose bodies are socially normalized as disposable for endless growth and production, as well as communities' vulnerability to climatic and environmental disasters and their access to the resources needed to adapt. So, building on this, in this video, I would argue that Dalit consciousness provides an essential critical entry point to understand and dismantle the extractive hierarchies of Brahmanism and capitalism together. The very logics that together perpetuate both caste based oppression as well as climate and environmental injustices. So, coming back to the second part of this video, where I will read out two poems written by Dalit scholars and artists. Um, these poems were published in an online magazine called the Bangalore Review. So, in a special issue titled Seven Dalit Poets Speak Their Mind Through Their Poems, the curator or the editor, Dr. Abhijit Khandkar, noted that when a Dalit writes a poem, it becomes a vehicle not only of self expression, but an inevitable exploration of the circumstances that have defined the poet, knowingly or unknowingly, and record of sorts takes place, whereby the poet puts down every such emotion and occurrence that they not only use to fight their circumstances, but also make those around them aware of the events that led up to such consequences. So basically, poetry writing or revolutionary writing is one of the many tools for emancipation of the Dalit people. So the curator of the special issue writes, the poems presented here by, I quote, the poems presented here by 7 Dalit poets showcase their journey of discovering their purpose in life through reading and writing. In these poems, you will find not only a slow processing of generational trauma, but also a need to share with others these experiences that helps in building a discourse around what it means to be a Dalit that will eventually lead to a complete breakdown and disruption of the basis of the caste system. End quote. So, I will read out the first poem, and the poem is titled Supernova. It's written by Gautam Vegda. Listen, my soon to be born baby. Be prepared for the battle, like we all were. I have found a manhole mightier than the black hole. Light cannot escape from the latter, but your rights continue to be absorbed unfailingly by the former. The black hole absorbs everything but your rights. The battle for dignity is spirituality to us. Be the star in the endless dark matter. Don't let your nuclear fusion fade. Shine brighter and brighter. If you collapse, do not worry, my child. A supernova will occur out of you. New stars will be born. Shock waves and cosmic rays will agitate an age old structure. Stars, my child, can't be fettered. So, Gautam Vegda is a Dalit poet writing in English, illustrator, and PhD scholar from the Indian state of Gujarat. He has also authored a couple of poetry collections named Vultures and Other Poems and A Strange Case of Flesh and Bones. So, in this poem, the poet, as remarked by the curator, I'm reading from the special issue itself, the poet explores a rarely explored theme of Dalit identity and science fiction. The poem is an advice come resolve of the father to his yet to be born son. The manhole for the marginalized is more real and dreaded reality than all these black holes out there. The poet, in spite of his despair, is hopeful for the future and upholds his identity and its dignity. So, in India, for the context, most of, like I mentioned, manual scavenging and also occupations that directly that entail directly handling human waste, whether in the manholes, these are all done by the Dalit communities, none of them by the privileged caste groups. And I belong to the privileged caste group. I'm not a Brahmin, but I come from a privileged caste group. And I'm telling from my own experiences in India that the entire economy is structured on the caste-based economy. And if this foundation falls, the rest of the class structure is it's very difficult for the rest of the class structure to survive when the foundation itself is based on the caste. And anyway, so moving on to the second poem, and the second poem is titled Agitation, Agitation, Agitation. So the original poem is written in the Indian language called Marathi, and is written by Anjali Tayade, and this poem is translated in English by Shardul Thakur. So the original poem was written in Marathi language. I said to him, "Now come and join the agitation. Take up some role in the agitation." He said, "Only recently have I finished my education and am looking for a job. Come later." He got a job, started working. I went back to him and repeated, "Now come and join the agitation. Take up some role in the agitation." He replied, "Only recently have I got a job. Now I'm thinking of getting married. You roam around so much. Why don't you help me find a rich bride to get married to?" Eventually, he got married, had children. His children grew up and they got married, making him a grandfather. He purchased a car and a bungalow. I visited him in his bungalow, and just as I was about to plead him to join the agitation, He called everyone into the living room: his children, his wife, his daughters in law, his grandchildren, all gathered. He introduced me, saying, "Here's a selfless volunteer who spent his entire life for the agitation." What was more, he felicitated me with a shawl and also a coconut. I came home, removed the shawl, threw it, slammed the door behind me, tightly embracing the portrait of Baba Sahib. I cried with anguish, "Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim, Jai Bhim." Jai Bhim refers to Baba Sahib Ambedkar. It's a movement to call out victory to Baba Sahib Ambedkar's teachings and on Dalit emancipation. So, friends, in the first poem, Supernova, we see that supernova is used as a metaphor to depict Dalit consciousness as a cosmic force, an outburst of liberation from oppression that has the power to revolutionize and birth new constellations of inclusive legal and social structures. Dalit consciousness here is a planetary force of new forms of world making. In the second poem, Agitation, 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 we see the revelation of Dalitality as a tension between one's assimilation into the oppressive socio-economic system and the radical dissent and defiance aimed at systemic change. So the poem sort of, in my view, shows the tension between one's co-optation into the system because it's comfortable and there's no time left to protest, and on the other hand, protesting for radical systemic change. So we often get caught up in chasing targets and accomplishments that fit into the predetermined vision of how our lives are supposed to be and look. Our co-optation into the existing capitalist class structure, which benefits us without significant role, is easy. It may require foregoing our identities. This ultimately leads to a diversification of domination, far anything from actual inclusion. Let's not forget, capitalism works like a zero-sum game. People benefit at the cost of oppression happening elsewhere. So together, these two poems, I would argue, they show that Dalit consciousness is not just a struggle for social justice on earth. It is rather a planetary force to rethink capitalist oppression because it challenges domination and reimagines a world where caste, class, and ecological exploitation are dismantled together. So, friends, basically, the point of narrating those poetries of resistance was to show that how, when Dalit consciousness comes together, it becomes a collective force that can have planetary implications to dismantle all the structures of oppression and dismantle the caste system and also the class system, which are actually nurtured by the by the ideology of Hindu Brahmanism and the ideology of capitalism. So it's basically a call. Dalit consciousness is a call to abolish these two ideologies, Brahmanism and capitalism. So that's what this video is about, and I am planning to make part 3 of this video, which I will upload later, to show how Dalit consciousness and Dalit untouchability, the problem, still exists in India's rural spaces today, And I will basically talk about that in relation to my own fieldwork in the state of Odisha, eastern Indian state of Odisha, where I observed untouchability and how that impacted affect climate affected communities, aggravated vulnerability. So yeah, I until then, take care and peace.